The Cox .049 displaces 49 thousandths of a cubic inch. It sold for $3.95. The plant in Santa Ana turned out more than 1 million of them a year. And for 60 years, the men who own them have argued about what those two small parts are made of. Not brass, not aluminum. Past that, the paper says steel, the grinding wheel says cast iron, and this channel has said both, in writing, days apart. So which is it? To settle it, you need 1 bar of steel and 2 layers. By the end of this film, you will know which test was telling the truth, and why every one of them was. This is the last whistle, where the small machines get taken apart properly. Subscribe before we start. This one runs long, and it ends with a correction. The argument did not start on this channel. It only surfaced here. A film about this engine went up in the middle of July. Within days, a viewer wrote in with an experiment. He had taken a piston to a bench grinder. He had taken a cylinder too. He read both spark trails and posted his finding in capital letters, cast iron. He had a machinist's reason ready. Soft steel goes smeary under a cutting tool at tolerances this fine. Iron does not. This channel wrote back, spot on. Another viewer, a design engineer, argued the opposite, matched steel in both parts. Chosen so piston and cylinder would grow together in the heat and hold a fit through every degree of warm-up. This channel wrote back, spot on. 2 answers, opposite metals. The same channel agreeing with both, in writing, days apart. A third man caught it. He tagged the channel directly and said, in effect, one of these answers has to be wrong. He was right. Everyone in that comment section, on every side of it, believed the same thing, that this question already had an answer, and the only problem was the other camp. The certainty is the mistake. Tonight the file gets reopened, and this time the evidence gets read all the way down. So what is this small machine actually made of, and why could nobody ever prove it? The paper first. August 1955. The British magazine model aircraft strips one of the first Cox engines to reach a test bench and prints its verdict. A heat-treated alloy steel cylinder and a hardened, ground and honed steel piston. Steel. On the record. The same report adds a line the trade could barely believe, that this is the only lapped piston engine in the world finished so precisely that any piston fits any cylinder, straight from the bin. Whatever these 2 parts were made of, the factory could make them the same way 1 million times over. Case closed. For 7 years. November 1962. Aeromodeller runs a full engine analysis on a faster engine from the same family and prints a different machine entirely. The cylinder now, mild steel. Unhardened, soft, not heat-treated alloy. The opposite end of the steel shelf. 2 magazines. The same maker. Different engines from one line, tested 7 years apart, and the printed record already disagrees with itself. And buried in that 62 analysis sits one more line, printed without explanation. The piston, it says, was hardened, on its walls only. On its walls only. No one at the magazine asked why a factory would harden one surface and leave the rest soft. The line simply sat there in print for 57 years. So the paper camp has a problem. Its own file is split. If the documents cannot agree on the metal, the men at the grinding wheel deserve their hearing. A spark test is older than the hobby itself. Press metal to a spinning stone and the wheel tears particles from the surface. They burn as they fly. Iron burns one way, steel another, and a trained eye reads the difference like handwriting. Cast iron writes short. Dull red sparks, bursting right at the wheel, dying fast. Plain mild steel writes long. Pale streamers with a few small forks, sailing past the edge of the bench. It is an argument where both sides can bring their evidence to the same bench grinder. And the iron camp is not guessing. Cast iron carries graphite flakes through its body, giving it the behavior machinists have relied on for generations. The British trade had good reason to favor cast iron pistons inside hardened steel cylinders. An early English diesel tried iron running in iron and wore itself loose. Its maker switched to cast iron inside hardened steel, and the pairing became a standard answer. So a man who grinds a Cox piston and reads short bursting sparks is not making anything up. The sparks really do look like that, and that is what makes this harder. Because if the wheel is seeing cast iron, then why does the paper keep saying steel? Which leaves one possibility nobody in the comment section said out loud. The paper camp and the wheel camp were never testing the same thing. Because they were not, here is the secret that ends the shouting. That little piston is not one metal. It is one piece of steel wearing two different identities, a skin and a core. The skin was engineered, hardened in a chemical bath until its surface became a different recipe from the bar it was cut from. A few thousandths of an inch deep, glass hard, wear resistant, and on a grinding wheel, a different animal. The core was left alone, soft, ductile, mild steel, soft on purpose, so the factory could fold the metal around a steel ball and give the connecting rod its socket. No wrist pin, just soft metal, swaged around a ball by the million. How that trick was done, the copper mask, the furnace, this channel has already told that story. The evidence is still there. Pick up an old piston and the inside still glows faintly copper, the leftover mask, right where the record says it should be. One bar in, two identities out. Now go back to the spark chart. A carbon-rich hardened skin throws a busy bursting spark that starts right at the wheel, a pattern sitting next door to cast iron. That reading is this film's reasoning, not a document. But it is the reading that lets every test in this story tell the truth at once. The wheel reads the skin, the paper describes the core. Neither one was lying. They were answering different questions, one layer apart. This was never an argument about a metal. It was an argument about a depth. But if the answer is a layer, it has just handed us a harder question. Two faces of steel pressed together at 15,000 turns a minute, dry, with almost nothing between them. By every rule the trade wrote down, they should weld themselves shut. Why doesn't this one? Every boy who ever owned one ran a metal test of his own. He just never called it that. Saturday morning, 1960-something. The sweet smell of the fuel, mixed the night before, the smell those men say never left them. A thumb already raw at the knuckle from flipping. And before the battery, before the scream, a boy turned the propeller slowly with one fingertip, through the top of the stroke, and felt it. The pop. A soft, definite snap, like a knuckle. Two pieces of metal meeting at a fit measured in millionths, then letting go. Then the clip went on, and the pop gave way to the scream. 15,000 turns a minute from a machine the size of a walnut. The careful ones kept a scrap of dowel by the fuel can, a chicken stick, because respect for this engine was learned one raw knuckle at a time. The men in the comment section still talk about that pop the way other men talk about a first car. Engines come out of barns after half a century, seized tight, not worn out, the collectors say, but locked by their own closeness. The pop was not a sound, it was a measurement. The fit between the skin and the cylinder wall. The exact thing this whole argument is about. And every boy who ever owned one took that reading without knowing what he was measuring. The boy was holding both answers. Nobody had taught him to read them yet. Tucked in a corner of a builder's FAQ, the Bible of the model engine trade lays down a warning. A steel piston in a steel liner, it says, will work well enough, and then freeze up soon after the engine starts. Best results come from cast iron in steel. The author adds 3 words, I'm guessing. The trade had a name for the failure, galling. 2 same steel surfaces, pressed hot and dry, can weld at microscopic peaks. Underload, the metals grab each other one peak at a time. each tiny weld tearing and reforming until the engine locks solid. That is the rule. One of the steadier voices in the thread said it plainly. Steel on steel. Galling is a showstopper unless you solve it with metallurgy or surface treatment. He was right. Cox used both. The piston surface was hardened. The mating cylinder wall was not. That changes the problem completely. Galling is a disease of sameness. What the furnace shipped was never sameness. A glass-hard, carbon-rich skin running against a soft, unhardened wall. Different hardness. Different surface chemistry. Different behavior where friction actually happens. The engine was never simply steel on steel. It was armor on butter. And the butter was the tool. There was always a third party in this argument. It never posted a comment. Heat. A fit measured in millionths does not survive carelessness. The National Archive record of Leroy Cox says his shop was first in the industry to measure pistons and cylinders with air gauges. Tolerances the tribute puts at 25 millionths of an inch. That number comes from a tribute, not a blueprint, and the men who stood at the bench put it more plainly. Several millionths, read on an air spindle, undersized parts rejected on the spot. The exact number is disputed. The discipline is not. A sealed room, double doors. Temperature held steady, not for comfort, for truth. At millionth scale, the heat of a human body bends a measurement. Workers went in 2 at a time, no more. One veteran machinist tells it flatly. If somebody opened a door to the parking lot, the men inside chased their settings for the next 2 hours. Metal moves with every degree. Steel grows one way, iron another. Aluminum twice as fast as either. The whole plant was an argument with heat, fought every shift by refusing to let temperature vote. And now the 3 answers are on the table. Skin, core, heat. 60 years later, 2 camps were still shouting about what the metal was. The factory's real obsession was never simply what the metal was. It was what the metal did when it got warm, which leaves the iron camp 1 card. And it is a real one. Cox agreed with them, once. There was a Cox engine with a cast iron piston, a bigger 15-size motor from the same machine from Barstock family. The full graphite flake, self-lubricating, textbook-approved recipe. One veteran restorer, the same man who settled half this argument in the comments, gives it a brutal verdict. Probably the worst engine Cox ever made. Vibration that shook the airframe. An iron piston that wore badly in its mild steel cylinder. A wrist pin that drifted sideways as it ran, gouging the bore. The company that built its name on a hardened skin over a soft core tried the other camp's metal at full scale. It did not take. And the physics had already voted. Reference tables put cast iron's thermal growth about 10% below plain steel. Run an iron piston in a steel cylinder, and every degree of warm-up changes the fit. At millionth scale tolerances, 10% is not a footnote. It is the whole ball game. The iron camp was describing a real engine. It just was not this one. There is one piece of paper that would have ended this argument before it ever started. Cox drew its parts the way real manufacturers did, on title-blocked drawings with boxes for material, finish, and heat treat. 3 fuel sheets from 1977 survived to prove the system existed. The piston drawing has never surfaced. Not in an archive, not in an auction, not in 6 decades of collectors hunting everything this company left behind. The restorers point, almost to a man, at one cheap lead-eased machining steel as the likely answer. It fits every fact in this film. It has never been confirmed on paper. And here is what the record preserves about the people who could have settled it. Almost nothing. Not the name of the man who ran the hardening bath. Not a photograph of the sealed room. Not even agreement about the chemistry. One insider remembered nitrogen chemistry. Restorers who stripped the parts remember cyanide salts. The print record stays silent. Whoever he was, he came in on a shift, lowered a basket of pistons into a dangerous bath, pulled them out at a hardness he could not see, and went home. He did it right often enough that 1 million engines a year left that building. Nobody wrote his name down. The empty box is not a hole in the record. It is the record of men paid to make parts, not paper. A magazine printed the phrase, "hardened" on its walls only in 1962. 57 years passed before anyone publicly explained why. The men who knew were not writing. They were working. The machines from Santa Ana mostly still exist. Collectors have them by the drawerful, and they still pop under a fingertip. What disappeared was smaller, the reading of them. The knowledge that a part can be two identities at once. That a spark trail can be a statement about a surface, not a soul. That somewhere between a tribute's 25 millionths and a workman's several, there was a room where the difference mattered enough to control the air. And it was never really about one toy. For a stretch of years in the middle of the last century, this country could take an ordinary bar of cheap steel and a room full of ordinary people and turn out a fit measured in millionths, 1,000 times a day, at $3.95, without a computer anywhere in the building. That skill was taught by hand, held in hands, and never written down. For about 20 seconds, that is worth grieving. Then stop. Because the argument itself is proof the knowledge did not die. While this film was being written, grown men were still filing spark reports on a toy piston, photographing the copper glow inside parts older than their grandchildren, and holding a storyteller to account for one sentence. No museum on Earth runs quality control that strict. This hobby runs it for free. The archive went silent. The archivists never did. So here is the verdict, ode to the comment section and overdue. To the man who took his piston to the wheel, read short, bursting sparks, and wrote cast iron in capital letters, the wheel did not lie. He tested the surface. And the surface really does produce that reading. His error was trusting a surface to speak for the whole part. To the engineer who reasoned from heat-matched materials, growing together, he had the core logic right, and the 55 magazine behind him. To the restorer who mapped the whole process in a comment longer than some magazine articles. Closest of all. The paper trail supports mild steel, hardened selectively, with the cast iron engine standing as the exception that failed. And to the man who caught the contradiction, two opposite answers signed by the same hand. He was most right of all. He was not correcting a fact. He was correcting a habit. The habit of answering fast before asking what was actually tested. Because this channel's error was never simply picking the wrong metal. It was picking sides in an argument where the true answer was a layer. Spot on, this channel said, twice, to opposite camps, without checking either. An earlier film here even named the hardening chemistry as if it were settled fact. It is not settled. The record disagrees with itself, and saying so out loud costs nothing but pride. The wheel and the paper never met until a comment section introduced them. The engine was never the metal everyone said it was. It was one bar of steel wearing two faces. 60 years into an argument, a $3 toy started. When two tests disagree, stop asking which one lied. Ask what each one touched. That rule was built into a toy engine by men whose names nobody wrote down. They never wrote the rule down either. They built it into the part instead. And somewhere, a garage in Santa Ana, a dead engineer's filing cabinet, or a box lot at an estate sale, there may still be a drawing with a material box filled in with typewriter ink from the 1950s. Whoever finds it ends the paper argument with a photograph. But the working answer is already here. The last working copy of that knowledge is not sitting in an archive. It is in a drawer, in a garage, in somebody's closed hand. If this film earned anything tonight, it earned it by admitting where it was wrong. There are more machines on this bench waiting for the same treatment. Subscribe if that is the kind of story you want told. And if you still have one of these engines, turn it through the top of the stroke tonight. Thumb and finger on a cold propeller. One slow turn. The pop is still there. It was there before you knew what a spark chart was. It will be there after the last comment thread goes quiet. 2 layers of 1 bar of steel, meeting at a fit no argument ever managed to loosen. The paper was right, the wheel was right, the fingertip was right first, and now you know, at last, exactly what is popping.